Joining us now is Jason Greenblatt, former White House envoy to the Middle East and author of In the Path of Abraham. Shalom.
Shalom, good to be with you, Yoni, at these very difficult and challenging times.
Thanks for joining us from Dubai. Now, you were here recently in Israel. You visited the southern kibbutz of Kfar Aza, but you did that visit with Palestinian activist Samir Sinjlawi.
Well, Samer is a new friend of mine, new Palestinian friend of mine that I recently met. We went there about a month ago to Kfar Aza. First of all, let me just say that nothing can prepare you for the kind of for what you're going to see at Kfar Aza if you haven't been there. No matter what the news reports say, no matter what the pictures say, no matter what you hear, it's just brutal and devastating to visit and so important. But the reason I took Samer there is there are just too many people around the world, in particular in Arab countries, but really all over Europe, all over America, who deny the atrocities of October 7, who say that Israel is overreacting, lying, exaggerating. I wanted them to hear directly from a Palestinian what he saw through his eyes, what he saw, what happened at Kfar Aza, and of course the other places, although we only visited Kfar Aza. And I think the exchange between us was really quite remarkable. And I hope people will watch the video to understand that while he may be one of the few Palestinians who've spoken out loud, and he's very brave and courageous, and I give him tremendous credit, not only for the visit, but for allowing us to video it and share it. I hope they realize that there are Palestinians, however few they may be, I don't know, who are willing to speak up for what's right and try to educate the world about the atrocities that happened.
And as you said, as few as there will be, and that's the problem. We see the polls of how much support the massacre has among Arabs, also in Judea and Samaria, also in Gaza. So maybe Samer is the one righteous man in Sodom.
I'd like to think it's not one. I think there are many who just are afraid, but we've seen the polling. We've seen a lot of the polling that suggests that between 70 and 80% of Palestinians, even in Judea and Samaria, support what happened. He actually addresses that in the video. He speaks about an incident, and it's only, I think, 18 Palestinian students who he spoke about that his words, caught the question the wrong way, and they definitely don't support it. But we don't know. I'm not a big believer in the polls. What's most important to me, though, is to have that conversation, because without the conversation, absolutely nothing happens, at least with the conversation. I hope this video gets widely watched, not only in Israel and among Palestinians, of course, but in the Arab world as well. The Arab world is watching things on Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera is a sewer when it comes to Israel. They're doing such a terrible job indoctrinating the Arab population. I hope that they'll hear from Samer and maybe others like Samer and understand the truth about October 7th.
Now, you're speaking to us from Dubai, and this brings us to the Abraham Accords, the Arab states. Do the Accords create something to hold on to as we try to think of the day after the war?
Yes, I do think so. At the moment, for sure not, right? Let me start with the United Arab Emirates. First of all, tremendous, tremendous credit goes to the United Arab Emirates and its leadership. It is not easy for them to stand by the Abraham Accords. It is not an easy time for them. But what they're doing with respect to the Abraham Accords, not only standing by it and standing by Israel, the things that are challenging for them, they're dealing with head on. I think their leadership has been absolutely phenomenal, and I think that they deserve tremendous credit. And I hope the Israeli government and all people who support Israel are grateful to the United Arab Emirates for this. When it comes to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and others, I think this is not the moment. In fact, I think we took a couple of steps backwards a few days ago. Saudi Arabia issued a much different statement that it's been issuing in the past. I don't know the details of what happened, but they called out John Kirby, the spokesman for the National Security Council at the White House. He must have said something that annoyed them or angered them. And their talking point in the statement went back to the much more traditional demands of a Palestinian state. And I think that's unfortunate. I'm sure they had their reasons for it. But nevertheless, I do think this region wants to be on a path towards peace with Israel. I've always said that none of them are willing to give up on the Palestinians. They all support the Palestinians deeply, economically, socially, emotionally, including whatever a Palestinian state might mean to them versus what it might mean to me or you or your audience. But I know that they believe that the region and each of the countries here would be so much safer and better off for all the things that they're building if we could figure out a way, if somebody could figure out a way to achieve some sort of agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. What it isn't is what the White House is pushing right now. I'm really shocked that they are, first of all, there's word, I don't know if it's true or not, that the State Department has been directed by Secretary Blinken to look into some sort of declaration of a Palestinian state. I think that's terribly harmful, dangerous. They're talking about, forget two-state solution. Now they're using a phrase like independent Palestinian state. Referring to a Palestinian state itself is in and of itself is problematic because nobody knows what that means. But when you layer on the word independent, now you're starting to define it a little bit more. And if an independent Palestinian state means that in Judea and Samaria and Gaza, the Palestinians could create what Gaza became, a Hamas-stan, a state, if you will, of terror that could attack Israel and continue to try to destroy Israel. It's mind-boggling that they would use such words. Now's not the time to talk about anything like that. I'm really shocked. And I've been a guy who's been very complimentary about the Biden administration since October 7th. I'm a Trump person. I think President Trump did some amazing things for Israel. But I do believe that until recently, President Biden's administration has been very strong and very helpful for Israel. But over the last period, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, they're starting to say things that are deeply concerning to me.
So there's the Palestinian state that the U.S. is pressuring for, and there are also the sanctions against Israelis, as if Israel was Iran or China.
Right. Look, I'm against those acts that these Israelis do, the extreme acts that they do. But to equate that with what the Palestinians do, to put it on the same level, to suggest that it's the same amount and the same degree of violence and things like that is completely wrong. It's a lie. It's deceptive. I think they're doing it for political purposes. President Biden, to his detriment, has been losing a lot of support for his position on the war on Hamas. So I don't condone it. I think it's wrong, awful, completely the wrong direction, and it's coming from a political place.
So we mentioned the Arab states. Do you think that they want to go into Gaza to help rebuild a different entity in the area?
I think it would be extraordinarily challenging for them to do it without any kind of clear roadmap. I think what Israel is doing is essential. I don't want to for a second suggest that the war on Hamas isn't essential, no matter the devastation, no matter the consequences. But I think at this point, one of the things that Israel should be doing very clearly with the United States, with the Gulf states, is trying to talk about a day after. A day after doesn't mean a Palestinian state, a two-state solution, whatever the phrase is. But I think in order to get the Gulf states on board with any kind of plan, I think the Gulf states and others have to understand that Israel now has the ability and willingness to discuss whatever a day after might be. It could be a whole bunch of different things, many of which will not be achievable. But I think if I could give any advice to the Prime Minister's office, it would be that now is the time to engage on what a day after might look like, not make demands out of the Gulf states. I don't think the Gulf states are in any position to take any kind of demands out of Israel, but if they could be approached in partnership, if Israel is serious about trying to partner with the Gulf states and others to show how they want to help the Palestinians of Gaza regroup, if you will, so that it doesn't become a burden on the Gulf states alone, and there's some sort of credible plan to allow them to go back to some sort of normal living, with, of course, the absolute security that Israel needs, without the ability of Hamas or anyone like Hamas to be able to attack Israel. I think now's the time for that conversation.
You know, there are reports in Israel according to which the Prime Minister is postponing the debate regarding the day after because it may be, politically controversial.
I understand the Prime Minister's position, and there's a lot of logic to it, but I would say that at this point in the war, and given that the war is going to continue for some period of time, I think now is the time to begin that conversation. I think it should be done behind closed doors. I don't think it should be done in public at all. I think people should be very sensitive to leaking, but I think it is important to start that conversation. And I would say that if we were in the White House, back when we were in the White House under President Trump, there would be a lot of pressure on our White House to start that conversation as well. So I could only imagine what the Biden administration is going through. And again, I have been complimentary. I am nervous and upset about some of the things that they're saying, but I think we do need to respect how strong he has been for Israel, and we need to give him the tools to be able to push back on people that criticize him. So we should be helping him to help Israel.
Now, regarding Qatar, how do you see their role in the whole issue of the hostages?
I think Qatar is doing the best that it can. I do think it's unfair to suggest that they have all this power over Hamas. I don't think it's true. Forget Al Jazeera for a second, which is a totally different issue, and I've said my piece about Al Jazeera. I think, and I was in Doha before my trip to Dubai. I've met with the Prime Minister. I actually brought some Israeli families to meet with the Prime Minister and the National Security Council there. I could see in the bags under their eyes how hard they're working, but they don't have the kind of power that people suggest that they have. I think they're doing the best they can in an extraordinarily challenging situation. And the one potential weapon they have is to throw Hamas out. Excuse me, to throw Hamas out, right? I don't think anybody is ready to suggest that they should give up on everything, because once they throw Hamas out, then all doors are closed. If somebody wants to try to play that card, if President Biden or Prime Minister Netanyahu asks that of Qatar, it'll be interesting to see what Qatar does. But since nobody has asked that, because nobody wants to potentially ruin the chances of bringing all the hostages home, I think that the criticism lobbed at Qatar is somewhat unfair. And I do think they're trying very, very hard in an extraordinarily difficult situation.
But do people in the world, people who are relevant to this issue, understand that Israel cannot pay any price?
I think it's mixed. I think Israel has done an excellent job in this war telling its story, even though there's a lot of haters around and many people suggest that Israel has lost the PR war. I'm not sure that's true, and I think Israel has done a great job on CNN, Fox, all the networks in America, sharing with English-speaking spokespeople the reality. But when it comes to this, when it comes to explaining why they're rejecting Hamas's outrageous, disgusting demands, there they probably need to do it a little bit better. They're probably sensitive because of the negotiations, but if things are leaking to the press and demands are being made, I think it's important for Israel to explain what the demands are and why it's difficult. And the kinds of people that Hamas is demanding be released, the kinds of murder that these people did, that these Palestinian terrorists did. So again, if I had to offer some advice, I would do a more thorough job explaining the demand, why Israel is pushing back on some of these demands. But I will say, because we all feel for the hostage families, this is a situation that nobody could ever imagine. And the position that the Prime Minister is in and the War Cabinet and anyone else who's involved in these discussions, I don't envy them. It must be excruciating for them to make these decisions.
By the way, earlier you said when we were in the White House, are you hoping to go back to the White House? You, former President Trump.
Well, I think that President Trump was an amazing friend to Israel. He was a great president to the United States. Too soon for me to say. I was honored to have the job the first time, and if it comes up again, the opportunity comes up again, and I could really help effectuate policy the way we were able to do it the first time, it would probably be very difficult to say no, but it's too soon to tell.
Jason Greenblatt, former White House envoy to the Middle East and author of In the Path of Abraham, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.